Ladies, gentlemen, and Haradrim of all ages, we can't go 3 days without something major coming to the game, and when the things that are appearing are helpful to the player base, that is at least always a good thing. So let's talk about the very important hotfix that hit late last night, finally properly fixing and increasing the Rawhide and Iron Chunk drop rates. This hasn't had much detail in the actual hotfix notes itself as to the amounts that were improved, but early player reports are saying that Nightmare dungeons now have drop rates of these materials up to around 300 per run on average, and Duriel's drop rate of both of these has been essentially doubled from what it was before. Doubling these rates, though, isn't totally game-changing, but considering the amount of time that I have had to spend farming Rawhide and Iron Chunks with all the build creating and testing that I do as well, having that time cut in half in the future is definitely better than nothing. I just wish that they had tripled or quadrupled the rates rather than just doubling it. That said, though, the change is fresh. We'll see how it feels in a few days, but for now, my immediate opinion is that I'm simultaneously very happy this was changed and improved, but I just wish that the amount was actually larger of an impact. Aside from this, then, there was a full-on client patch earlier in that day as well, this one specifically being completely for performance issues. There were quite a few new bugs that were causing crashes and things that were causing lag problems on the servers too that have cropped up since the release of the expansion in the start of Season 6, and pretty much every update that has happened since then, which is pretty much every couple of days, has come with some sort of fixes to try and work towards getting rid of these problems entirely. So this client patch was just fully working towards that fix in general. The next thing isn't a game update, but it technically can affect your game. It's Diablo 4's Vases of Hatred. They say a picture can speak 1,000 words, and this video clip playing in the background says things that I could never hope to explain with words, such as that these are vases that you send to your enemies to scare them and I guess creep them out, but obviously this is just a fun marketing trick and a way to create a cool Halloween themed gift that you can send to people who theoretically also like Diablo, because obviously if they weren't aware of this, they'd probably just be incredibly confused when this arrived at their door, maybe a little bit freaked out, and maybe a little bit inclined to call the police as well. The weirdest part of all of this, though, is the very last couple of seconds of the clip where they show that there is an actual in-game reward if you buy one of these, which appears to be a mount and a mount armor set. This is by far not the craziest cosmetic that I've seen for the game. It doesn't feel unfair that you need to buy a vase full of fear and send it to someone to get this. It just is a neat in-game bonus reward for doing the real-life thing, and this game never ceases to amaze me with how crazy it can get with its marketing when it wants to. Past that, there is also a tweet response about a pretty common issue going around, which is that the horse health bar, the thing that is sort of invisibly keeping you from being dismounted when you're riding around the open world, is just sort of non-existent in higher Torment difficulties. Just pretty much any enemy whacking you once or twice will immediately knock you off, and that just feels sort of unfun entirely. The devs have heard this complaint, they've heard that this is an issue for players, and they have a fix planned for this relatively soon, with no specific date attached to it. Then aside from that, I just want to touch on a couple of topics that have become quite loud within the Diablo community over the last week or so. The first being the sheer agony of having a 4 greater affix unique item drop, then looking at it and finding out it has a minimum actual unique effect roll. For the most uniques in the game, that just makes them entirely unusable, even with 4 greater affixes. Most of my multi-greater affix uniques have been Mother's Embrace, and my first 4 greater affix item was a freaking shard of Varathiel. As a spiritborn, by the way, because those swords were bugged to drop for us, even though we couldn't use swords, and this was of course fixed in the patch last week, but that was still hilarious in itself. But then it was a 4 greater affix shard of Varathiel that also had a near minimum effect roll too, so it's not even like I could give it to someone else and have them use it or trade it and make some gold. It just made it even funnier in its own way. Not only was it a unique that I wouldn't use, it's one that I couldn't use, and one with a near minimum roll even if the other 2 parts weren't true to begin with, which is just comical, honestly. The solution to this seems relatively simple to me. It's just give unique items a baseline minimum roll that it can drop with for each greater affix that it has. 1 greater affix can guarantee it at least halfway to maximum effect roll, 2 greater affix is 60% as a minimum roll, 3 greater affix would be 70% minimum, and then 4 would be 80%. This way, at the absolute worst, if you have a 4 greater affix item drop, it will never be out of the range of usability, even if it still isn't perfect. And it would also make base ancestral uniques just feel a lot more rewarding too, if they were at least 50% effect rolls, because then you could probably at least use them if an ancestral unique happens to drop, because right now it's just sort of hard when you're first transitioning into like Torment 1, Torment 2 to find your first few decent ancestral items, because even if you find them, they may not have the actual stats that you need to make them even worth using to increase your power. Then the final thing worth talking about is mythic uniques, and specifically how much worse it feels to craft them suddenly in Season 6. In theory, the requirement should be easier, right? Mythic uniques are generally dropping at the same rate that they did last season, with theoretically improved odds more than anything on new Torment for Duriel and Andariel. So what's changed? Well, it's the way of getting specific, targeted mythic uniques of your choice. Now instead of it just being as simple as requiring a pile of gold and 4 resplendent sparks, 3 of which you used to be able to get from one-time guaranteed sources, so every player only had to have 1 RNG drop of a mythic they didn't want to get the specific mythic that they did want. To now this season being changed to being nearly non-existent gold cost, which of course is a positive, only requiring 2 resplendent sparks instead of 4, which is definitely a positive, especially as there are still 2 separate guaranteed one-time sources of these, so you don't even technically need the RNG mythic unique drop to craft a specific one to begin with. But then there's the negative addition, which is that to craft a specific mythic unique, you now also need 18 runes to do it as well. These need to be specific runes, not just having 18 runes as a concept, and these are different runes specifically depending on the mythic that you want to craft. This has actually made it way more agonizing for a lot of players, as getting 6 of the same legendary rune even to drop to begin with before considering the other 2 rarities too is a really hefty time investment. The best real way to do it is through farming the lair bosses, which is where the mythic unique drop rates are to begin with. Obviously, if you're willing to engage with trading, then you can get these runes much easier in a much simpler way without a massive amount of hassle, as long as you have a fair bit of gold, which of course you can also get from trading other items to begin with, especially items that you might get from doing your boss kills. Essentially though, it has just raised the barrier to entry for mythic uniques for a large portion of the player base from what it was last season. Now you have to either actively engage with trading, which a lot of people are averse to begin with, or the RNG requirement goes up even further if you're trying to farm it all solo. Because with current drop rates, your chances of getting 18 specific runes to drop are definitely worse than your chances of getting 2 mythic uniques to drop, so the drop from being 4 sparks to 2 from last season is actually a negative overall in the amount of time that it will take people who don't engage with trading. On top of this, a thing that I feel more people should probably be talking about too, runes are only a thing for players who bought the Vessel of Hatred expansion. You cannot get runes otherwise. They made a very big deal about the game still being playable for people who didn't own the expansion, so you could still play the game that you had bought even if you didn't buy the upgrade. But this specific interaction means that people without Vessel of Hatred literally cannot craft a specific mythic unique because they can't have runes. Their only option is to do the random rolls at the blacksmith for 2 resplendent sparks each. If this was a new mechanic added in this season, I would have less of a problem with the fact that they had added this in, like a new thing for the expansion, but this means they took something that was originally fully craftable and doable with non-expansion items last season, moving it into this season, and adjusted it to only be doable with something that is locked to people who have the expansion. Maybe it was an oversight, maybe it was a purposeful decision. Either way, it sort of rubs me the wrong way a little bit when I think about it. That's it for today then, everyone. Just a quick discussion and news talk about what has been going on the last few days in the world of Diablo 4. I hope you've enjoyed this, and let me know your own thoughts on any of this down in the comments below. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world our stage. Goodbye.